What are the other traits that you look for when you're thinking about hiring someone?
Yeah. Do you want to be here? Do you really want to be here? Everything that's ever been transformed in human history has occurred because it was built by individuals who wanted to be doing the thing they're doing. And so we talk about that. Like, I'd rather have a small team of people who give a shit and want to be doing what they're doing than a bunch of people who might have talent, but who might be kind of looking around for, oh, that's cool. Oh, this is neat. It's like, no, do you want to be building Flexpa? And do you believe that the future will have that Flexpa will be the rails of the healthcare system of the future? And so the question then becomes, how do you discern that? It's actually easier than you think.
Hello, I'm Ty Morse. This is my conversation with Andrew Arruda, the founder of Ross Intelligence and Flexpa. I hope you enjoy. Okay. All right, let's start. So I think your parents were like immigrants from Portugal to Canada.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, my parents were both born in this island archipelago in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called the Azores. So it's now become kind of a big tourist destination, kind of like a lot of people love going to Iceland. Mm-hmm. People are loving to go there. So it was really beautiful. They ended up being next door neighbors in Canada. So I grew up in Toronto, and it was really awesome being able to kind of like grow up with this other culture in the background. And a lot of that culture being an island culture and also being in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean was this place where ships would pass through on the way back between Europe and North America. And so it was just this really wonderful place where like storytelling skills were pretty high because there was a lot of people who made their life on the sea. So I was really lucky to be around some really amazing storytellers pretty early on. And I only realized that afterwards because now in my life, being able to be a good storyteller, whether you're a founder or an investor or just in general, has been something that's been really helpful.
Is there any particular person that like stands out as like a role model for storytelling, or was it just everyone?
My grandfather on my mother's side. So he was a fisherman, and he, renowned. Fishermen always, they always say like, if you want to hear a good story, you got to hear a fisherman tell a story. But his life was really incredible because the way that he ended up paying to have the family immigrate was he fished in Arctic waters and did a whole bunch of like explorations and signed up for some pretty extreme trips. And so he would leave for like 6 to 8 months at a time and go fish in northern waters, come back. And his stories, as a kid, I would be listening to Grandpa tell a story about how he was fishing next to a huge iceberg and he saw a narwhal, and then a canoe full of folks like northern Inuit people showed up, and he changed and traded a sandwich and some cigarettes for a spear from them. And so it was just like really incredible. And so he was such a hero of mine too, because he was so fearless. And a lot of his life was him just putting himself in situations that were super uncomfortable. But then the stories that he would talk about him, it kind of, now it's like it's easy in retrospect thinking through, but it made me realize that doing hard things is where you get some of the best stories, and the purpose of life in many ways is kind of like the story of it. And like people say, people do things now, they just like do it for the gram or do it for this, and it's like, do it for your life, do it for your children, do it for your legacy. And so that's kind of it instilled that pretty early on.
Yeah. So I know that you said that you like wanted to be an entrepreneur from like the very beginning, and you had a few businesses where you would like sell I think like soda and lemonade or something. Can you tell me about the first business that you started?
Yeah. So people are always like, I do think you can be born an entrepreneur. I think you can also learn entrepreneurial skills, but I think I didn't even know I just was doing things because I almost couldn't help myself from doing it. So yeah, some of my first businesses, I lived near a park And there was, softball games, whether it was like rec league adult or whether it was other kids. And so then I would just set up a stand and I would really engage with people too. That was like what I realized how I would drum up more business is I would talk to people and I would say like, what's your favorite type of soda? And when they told me, I would try to remember the person. So then I would be like, hey, I got that Dr. Pepper you like or whatever. And so I created a rapport with people. So that was really fun. And then another one of my businesses that I had a lot of fun and it helped me in school was we used to have to write exams in starting in elementary school at the school that I went to. And I would ask around and everyone knows kind of who the person is who does the best notes. And so I would tell them, hey, like if you provide me with some of your notes, I'll sell them to people as study aids. And then you'll get a % of the proceeds. And then why it was good for me is I would end up getting really high quality notes in all my classes. I'd make some money, they'd make some money. And so I remember like as a kid, I'd be like at, a UPS store, like printing out these packages, like, and having like this chart of like who's getting which notes for which subjects. And so by even like going through and creating those packets, I was reading the notes anyway. And so it ended up helping me in my marks. And every exam season, I ended up being able to buy something, fun, like another video game or probably like, and it was all like PC gaming. I wasn't allowed to have like a system growing up. So I spent all that money went right back into like computer stuff, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about, like you said, you grew up on the internet. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I was really lucky. When I was a kid, I lived right by a public library, which I basically lived at. And I got lucky because they got early access to the internet. It was probably some program early on where they were like,
What year was this?
It was probably like 94, 5, 6,
okay.
in and around there. And so I was young. I was like 5, 6, 7. And so I ended up hopping on to this terminal and these librarians were super helpful because I was always there anyway. And so I got on, this is like pre-Google, I'm like Netscape, like this before real search engines. I remember as search engines were dropping, I would try the new one. So it's like, okay, everyone knows SGs, but it's like Alta Vista, Web Crawler. There's a whole bunch that you would try out and you'd be like, oh, it's good for this or it's not. But I remember search engine, just like www.baseball.com or whatever. Like I was a kid, right? So like cars, and I was really into Babe Ruth at the time. So I remember I was doing a lot of trying to find every website that someone had built with Babe Ruth stuff on it. And so, yeah, I got on really early and the joke is like, I feel like I just never got off. And I used to get, they used to have this sign up board for signing up for the internet and you could sign up for 30-minute slots, but the rule was you couldn't sign up for 2 consecutive spots. So I would just show up in the morning, like early, like before it opened. And there would be no one there. Here's the other thing. Like I would go just like, it wasn't like there was a lineup. It was just me obsessive about this. And I would sign up for every other spot. And then the rule was if someone didn't sign up for a spot or if someone did, they would wait 5 minutes. And if no one showed in that 5 minutes, you could have the slot. And so I spent basically most of my early years either on the internet or sitting, reading a book, waiting to get on the internet. And so it's like a thrill for me now because I just have made a living off of being online and on a computer. And it's like, it's what I was going to do anyway. It's what I wanted to do. And it's been a really wild ride.
Yeah. I think your parents said that you could be anything, like if it was a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. You wanted to be an entrepreneur. How did that dynamic work when you were a kid?
Yeah. So like for my parents, for my family, it was really important for them that I got kind of like a professional degree. And I think it was helpful for me that I ended up going to law school. And how I balanced it really was as soon as I graduated law school, I ended up, one of my friends was someone who had studied comp sci, and he turns to me and he's like, hey, have you heard about what's going on with AI? And I was so lucky. It was 2014 in Toronto. And so Jeff's work was really, Professor Hinton, was really like taking off. And so we felt like we were even late by the time we started talking about it. But basically it was like, hey, what do you think about this idea where we create an AI system where you could ask legal questions to it and get answers to it? And I was like, this is so obviously where things are going. But the funny thing is by that time, say that I'm online, it's probably around 5, 6, 7, 8 in that, I don't know the exact year, how old I was. But by the time I'm having this conversation at like 22, 23, 24, probably 23, 24, I had been in essence on the internet for like a decade and a half or 2 decades, which is like rare. But so I kind of knew, okay, well, like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. There had been all this conversation about AI in the past, why it failed, et cetera. So I was up to speed on all that. And I was like, this is kind of inevitable, because I realized that the big thing that was unlocking a lot of this was the compute, was cloud, and was also digital data and the abundance of it that you could actually train these systems with. And so I was like, yes, I'm in. And so to answer your question, how I balanced it was I didn't. As soon as I could, which was I had graduated, fully certified at the firm, I quit and I sold all my stuff and put it into 2 bags and moved to one-way ticket. I actually have it framed. It's like behind me. That's my one-way ticket
on Air Canada.
On Air Canada, which is on brand. And I moved down here, and I have never looked back. I was like, that's what I wanted, and it's been incredible. So I did it. I think it's great. I think in life, it's super important to have different hats that you wear, that you understand different lenses. So whether that's you studied this or you tinkered on this subject or whatnot, and it adds to that like well-roundedness. And so sometimes I'm really glad I get to wear the hat of like someone who's been trained legally and understands those nuances. But I'm much more glad that I'm here and a founder and an investor and like actually getting to live out my childhood dream, really.
Yeah. Did you do any other projects while you were in high school?
Yeah. High school I was like a big jock, super jock. So I was voted most likely to play professional sports. I was also captain of the football team, student council president. So I was kind of like that guy. And so most of my time was in sports, which is kind of funny because it was like me splitting my time. I would play sports, chess club, debate club, and then I would be taking all the computer courses. We had a computer lab, and I was like coding in like HTML and like doing like those early websites where just like it flashed a lot and it just was like super noisy, and like that's what I was up to. And so that's what I spent most of my time on. Then had some of those like random businesses that I would kick up every now and again, organically.
Can you talk about any of those?
Yeah, like that. The notes thing was also like a big thing. Ahead of like Valentine's Day or whatever, I would go buy a bunch of like Valentine's Day related things and like be like to my friends, like, you have to get your girlfriend stuff. Like I have like a bunch of cards and whatever you want. Like I just like couldn't help myself but see a market demand on things. And then, I found a store that would sell like fireworks and a whole bunch of like, gag gifts, like whoopee cushions, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so then I just was like, hey, I would just mark it up like $1 or $2 per item. And then I was the guy who was like getting people like fun gag gifts and stuff. So it was like, this was like what people weren't online shopping. And so I was like, I just figured out even like online stuff and I could get them stuff. So I was that guy who could figure all that out. But most of my time was spent like playing pretty high level sports, which I think was really helpful because it taught me a lot of discipline. And I love contact. Like I'm a person who loves, it's funny to talk, like just like I'm an aggressive person.
Being in the arena?
Yeah, I like, I'm in the arena trying stuff. I like, I grew up, because I grew up blue collar, a lot of the people around me were very like in your face about something. And so I like that. I think that's, so like, I'm a big fan still to this day of boxing and contact sports. So I played football. I was middle linebacker and captain of the team. And I was known as the guy who was I played both ways as well. And I just loved contact. I love being in there. So that's how I spent most of my high school years.
Yeah. How did you decide like law school over anything else?
It naturally appealed to my idea of justice. I'm obsessed with fairness and justice. And I'm obsessed with America because when I was growing up in Canada, we used to have TV channels pipe in from Buffalo, as well as radio stations. Sometimes you can catch it. And then we would go there on trips. So sometimes we would drive all the way from Toronto down to Florida. So I got to like go through all the different states. And the classic, like, are we there yet? My dad, like, white knuckling it, trying to get through, Georgia as we made our way to Florida. So I always, like, that was kind of where my mind was. And so the idea of being able to go to law school and figure out, I'm also big into board games. I feel like the law is the board game rules of life, but most people don't know what the board game rules of life are. And so I was really motivated to go figure that out. And it felt like me learning, I gamified it in a way, in the sense of like, okay, I want to learn the game of life and how businesses are incorporated and how that works. Funny enough, like one of my worst marks, if not my worst mark in law school, was business organization, which is, so I actually went back, my law school invited me back to do a talk. I've gone a couple times. And I ended up seeing that professor, and I was like, I think I got the worst mark in that class, which is, talk about irony. So yeah.
Yeah. Why did you decide to, did you work while you were in college, and then, you said like until you passed the bar and then immediately you're finished with that?
Yeah. So I paid my way through undergrad and law school a lot, just growing up blue collar. My dad worked at an aluminum foundry, where they melt down aluminum, and he started kind of entry level and worked his way up to being a shift supervisor. And my mom worked at a bank. And so, I was just growing up with that work ethic. I worked, and then I said, well, if I'm going to want to be a lawyer in the future, I should know what it is. And so in my first year of undergrad, I ended up going and trying to get a job at the neighborhood law firm. And what was funny about it is I was a first year undergrad. And when I started talking to the founder of the firm, so it was like 4 or 5 lawyers at that time, we were talking. He goes, oh, what school are you at? I was like, University of Toronto. And he was like, oh, great. Well, I went to law school at York University, but that's a great law school too. And I was like, oh, I'm not in law school. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I'm in undergrad. And he was like, well, then what are you doing? And I was like, well, I want to get a job and learn before I get to law school. And I was like, you can pay me less, and I'm going to work way harder. And so he took me out for lunch, and I think it was mainly to let me down. And I ended up having a great conversation with the waiter. And he was like, you're a pretty personable guy, which was really nice. And he said, when can you start? And I was like, I'll start right now. And he was like, well, no, not now. And I think it was like a Thursday. So I had a job by that Monday. So I worked at that firm, and I worked every position at that firm. So I did like the filing stuff. I did front desk. I did basically like a switchboard. Anyone calling the firm, I took all those calls. And then I worked underneath and took on different tasks from each of those lawyers. So there was a lawyer who did personal injury. I did some of that. Real estate, I did some of that. Construction law, I did some of that. So wills and estates, I did some of that, and I helped out. And so I like understood both the law side of the business, but the business side of a business. And then I think that's where I'm most interested. Like people always say, I'm a startup founder, I'm a startup investor, but I see myself as I am a business person, and I like to back people who are building incredible businesses, because that's what it is. And I think sometimes the word startup makes me cringe a little bit, just because it can be a bit icky based off how it's become used these days, and like how there's like no barrier of entry to this. You could just say you have a startup by, putting up a landing page and just telling people.
Yeah. What was actually, let's talk about that a little bit. How do you think about when you're making, you've, I think, made like 50 plus angel investments. How do you think about backing someone? Why do you back them?
So I believe that you should put your money where your mouth is, in the sense of, if you really want the future to play out a certain way, it's all actually within our control. I'm a big believer in, most of history has been created by an individual, a team, a small team of people, of individuals who wanted and worked so hard to ensure that a form of reality was the dominant reality that then occurred. And so the big thing I look for is, are they building something and for a future that I want to be part of, that I want my children to be part of, that I want my children's children, et cetera. And then when I look at and I meet a founder, the big thing I'm looking for is someone who is going to do this, and regardless of anything, this person will do it, for bread money. This is what they want to do. The fact that they might find financial success in it is obviously good, because then they just can do more of it, is who I look for. And I've been really lucky because I love the fact that now, especially with AngelList and other ways, you could write smaller checks, because I'm doing basically all my angel checks are personal, and then I do some scouting. But most of my check size is like 5K, 10K. I've done 2,500. I'm going to do a 25K with one of my big checks. So they're not large, but they're not small, and they're mine. And I personally am putting my money into something, and part of my labor went into creating that money, and I want to put it into that future and give it to those people, and support them and learn from them. That's the other last part I'll touch on. I think like angel investing for me has been such a huge level up on learning. Like the only way to learn startup is by doing it, and the second best way is to watch other people do it. And the closest seat you can get to someone doing it in those teams is by investing and getting to be part of that story. And so made 50 plus bets. I'd love to say I get 50 plus monthly investor updates. I don't. That's kind of one of those things. I think investor updates are kind of underutilized, but I get a bunch, or I get the phone calls and the updates, and I learn each time. It's like I get to play poker. I'm playing poker myself as a founder, but I have like multiple monitors set up where I'm watching a bunch of other founders play their poker games. I know what cards they have. I can see what the market is, and I can see how they're doing. And I learn from them as I play my poker game.
Yeah. Have you ever had, like, what's the most standout interaction that you've had so far with a founder where like you don't know them, you have one meeting and you're just like blown away?
Most of my investments, because I believe as an angel, you shouldn't waste a founder's time. Usually because I'm writing 5, 10, 15, 20, I don't believe I should take more than one meeting of your time. So I actually make most of my decisions after one meeting, and oftentimes I'll make my decision after 15 minutes of talking to someone, and will in the meeting itself tell them, okay, I'm in for X amount, send me the safe. And so that happens. It happens basically to all the founders I invest in, where I very rarely, and it has happened where, and I learned the lesson on it, where I met someone, I was like, this founder's incredible. And then they hadn't started a startup yet. So we were in touch, they started a startup, and I just really didn't like the space they were in. And I knew, because I had been told, you're backing the founder, not the idea, especially early. But for some reason, I just really didn't love the idea enough, even though I really loved the founder. And then so a few months passed by, and they had pivoted into something that I really liked. And then I ended up I did invest, because I was like, I'm going to, but at double the valuation. So I was like, that was enough. It happened once, and I hope I've learned my lesson from that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about like the start of Ross. You talked a little bit about like you see this inflection point where things are going crazy with Jeff Hinton, and your co-founder to be sees that. Can you tell me about like the first few months and why you decided to drop out and start that?
Yeah. So the cool thing is we started an AI company in 2014. So starting an AI company in 2014 was not the same as starting an AI company in 2024, I'll tell you that. And so my co-founder, Jimo, on my first startup, Ross, he had been at UT Austin and had been really big on self-driving cars. And then I loved this about him. Talk about the attitude of like a founder who's born to do it and who's driven and relentless. He then had read some of Jeff's work and then went up to Toronto and transferred. And when I asked him why, he was like, well, I saw that self-driving cars were already going to happen. This was like in 2014. And he was like, and I wanted to be part of something earlier than that, and which is nuts. And so when I love how nuts that is, and I love people who are like that. So I was like, I'm in. When he was like, let's do this. And so how that journey was, what we had spotted was this tremendous exponential change in output of performance in AI systems. And so Hinton had and his work had beat Faith Bailey's on the ImageNet, and now deep learning neural networks are working really in a way that they hadn't worked before. But this is still pre-2017. All you need is attention and transformers and people like things actually being able to work in the way that you know now. So we had started before you see some of that stuff occur. And a lot of it seemed crazy. And a lot of sometimes people will ask like, oh, how did you know it was coming? But if you were there and you were surrounded in this pocket of basically everyone at every major AI institution, it can trace their roots back to like 3 labs in Canada. So Richard Sutton is based out of Edmonton, and he's the father of reinforcement learning. And Randy Goebel's out there too. He ended up jumping on with the Ross project as a mentor. Then you have Toronto, which is like the center, especially with Hinton and a whole bunch of proteges. LeCun had actually spent some time with Hinton as well. And then you have Montreal with Bengio and some incredible people there as well. And so you have kind of like the 3 people on the Mount Rushmore of AI, all within, so Toronto to Montreal is like 5.5, 6 hours, or depending on how fast you drive. Edmonton, you got to get on a plane. But we're all there.
It's clustered.
It's this incredible cluster, and AI had fallen out of fashion for many years, and these folks were getting that funding. And so being part of that, it made it seem like it was inevitable, and it didn't feel like any of the outside world. So when I would explain the idea of AI and where it was going to anyone outside of that bubble, they looked at me like I was crazy. But there was still, I don't know, and we thought, Jimo and I, when we were talking about Ross, we thought we were already a bit late in 2014. I remember us being like, oh my God, like this is already happening. We got to get out there. And so because of that, because of being surrounded by people who were so knowledgeable and so deep in the weeds, and it turns out that all these people are now the Mount Rushmore people, but incredibly lucky and fortuitous for us. Obviously, luck plays a huge part of it, and we were so lucky to be able to learn from these folks, hang out at, there used to be like AI events in Toronto in 2014, 2015 with like 50 people, and all of them are the most high quality AI minds and people who have gone on to do incredible things. And so being there just kind of happened. So then to the Ross story, we have, this idea, you should be able to ask any question you have on the law and get an answer to it. And we also dreamed of a world where AI would then learn with that base, be able to draft documents, have the audio ability to eventually potentially go in and actually represent individuals in the future. So that was like, we had this grand vision, and it's all playing out. So we ended up, and that's a whole story. The company's still ongoing. We ended up being the first company. First, they call it the first generative AI lawsuit ever. But when I literally have now, it's been a decade, I get to say I was building an AI before it was called generative, because we didn't call it generative AI. It was just like
AI.
Yeah. Or even just like machine learning, really, most of the time. Because ultimately it's just like linear regression with like compute and digital data. But yeah,
I remember hearing, like, I think Demis Hassabis talked about like it being extremely hard to raise money at the beginning of DeepMind. How was that for you guys?
Yeah, so talking to investors about AI in 2014, 2015 was tough, but we got so lucky. Talking about another thing that we got lucky on is we end up going into YC. So we start at the tail end of 14, but it's basically 15 by the time it becomes real. We're like in a basement and sketching things out. And then, so start of 2015, and then we get into YC. And so then we move down in May of 2015, and the president of YC at the time is Sam.
Yeah.
So Sam, this is right at the time he's about to start OpenAI, or had just started. We're talking right in that moment. So when we talk about what our idea is, I'm talking to another person from my cluster, from my world of this is
people
not,
in the world that can really understand.
He really understood it. Yeah. And so we got lucky again. And so with their investment and with YC's investment that unlocked a lot of people saying, well, who knows if this AI thing is real or not, and maybe this is another, because there had been those cycles in the past, and investors, especially some of the more established investors in the Valley who are older, might have gotten burned in like the 80s, or like maybe even like maybe some of them were around for some that 70s wave of AI stuff. So they were like, oh, I can get behind this. But I remember it was demo day, summer of 2015. And I don't want to say only because like it doesn't really even matter, but I can't remember another AI startup in our batch. And there might have been, right? There could have been, but I'm not sure if there was. And so, whereas now I was at the last batch and there's a lot, and I'm so happy for that. Like that's there's no greater feeling to me, and this is why I'm in this. This is why I love angel investing. This is why I love being a founder, than conceiving of a future years before it occurs and then getting to live it out, not because you were right, but because the conditions broke in the way that you had hoped and wished they would. Because I believe that a world with a lower entry to the cost of intelligence is a world that will lead to the democratization of essential services like health, like legal, like education, and will lead to this incredible world,
prosperous future,
an incredibly prosperous future. You know, the idea of what's coming for me now is something that makes me super excited. And so I don't care about being right. I care about living in the world I want to live in, and it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling to see where AI has ended up, considering where we started, what we believed it would, and what's occurring.
Yeah. Can you tell me about your experience during YC? You know, I don't know how many batches Sam was the president or CEO.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But yeah, it was awesome. Why I think the magic of YC is that you now have, let's use that same word, cluster. You now have a cluster of humans who see things similar to you. You might be in our, and we got another bit of luck. Our group partner in the summer of 2015, so you split into these different groups, was the leaders were Gary, who's now president, Michael Seibel, and Kasser, Yunus, who's like, Kasser to me is probably, I'd say, one of the most underrated, incredibly talented startup minds.
Period.
I think like everyone's sleeping on Kasser. He's like incredible to me. He's like a big inspiration. And so those were the three of my group partners. And you could book office hours with PG. So yeah, so and we did it. It was like, that was incredible too. So YC was all about normalizing and making you feel like your idea, which is super out there. We thought AI was going to play a bigger role in everyone's life. We thought AI would eventually get to a point where it could draft documents. We thought you would be interacting with AI in a prompt. We believe that. Our first prototype of Ross was it was an Android, because my co-founder liked Android at the time. It was like I forget, it wasn't the iPad, but like whatever, an Android.
A tablet, I think.
Yeah, a tablet. It was on a tablet, and you could ask it, you would say, like, what is the law in regards to XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And then it would take your audio, convert it, and then spit out passages. But that was way too futuristic. So when we went and demoed that to lawyers and law firms, they were like, I can't speak out loud in my office. I have to type it. So we had to change it. But so you're in this batch. So we have all these beliefs. And then you talk to someone and they're like, I believe that in the future, we need to change the way we grow our crops. And I'm building these capsules where you can grow food in your house in all these conditions. And then you're talking to someone else who believe, and it's just incredible. And so you're surrounded by people who are like, yes, and of course, and like, how can I help? And that's the greatest thing. People always say like, oh, tell me like, what's the magic of YC? And that's what it really is. It's about finding your tribe and surrounding yourself with people who are high quality and driven. You know, they say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's 100% true. So why not surround yourself with people who...
The best in the world.
Yeah. And it was incredible. Like the idea, like I'm actually like, my hair is standing up thinking about it. Like it just opened up all the doors, and I learned so much about investing, about building. And I always joke with founders, like when I give advice to any founder that I invest in, most of the time I'm just doing like a version, like a hack together version of like advice from PG, or Gary told me something, or Casser gave me advice, or Michael like got really upset because Michael's advice is usually pretty like hardcore. And so it's like, I'm just like doing a little bit of that to myself. And, but if you don't have that exposure, and you're not, and my peers and batchmates, if you don't have that, it's like, you're at such a huge disadvantage. You're surrounded by average people, and that's not a problem. But I'm talking about, you're trying to build something extraordinary. Don't you want to be surrounded by extraordinary people?
Yeah. Was there any like specific pivotal moment during YC that you can remember? Well,
one so the first thing that came to mind is actually just kind of more that I got to meet Joe Montana. So there was an event, and because Joe Montana has a pretty good portfolio. He invests in, he's quite good, and the team he surrounded himself with is quite good. So I was at a YC event, and Joe Montana was standing, and no one was talking to Joe Montana, and they were talking to other investors that were people would recognize. But I knew that was Joe Montana, and I was like, I got to go see Joe. So I walked up to Joe, and I was like, hey, Mr. Montana, like, because what do you call Joe Montana? I got to call him Mr. Montana. And I was like, I just want to say, like, I'm a big fan, and blah, blah. He was like, oh, thanks. And like, he shook my hand. I was like a little kid. So the football me got excited. And then I pitched him Ross, and I remember him saying, well, I've spent a lot of money on lawyers. I think it's not a bad idea. So that's kind of like a fun one. But I think the thing that stands out the most for me was office hours with PG, which is kind of like, it's almost cliche, right? Because people are like, oh, of course. But when the ability and the decisiveness to hear what we were building, to be critical about the right things that did help us, and the ability to understand, like at the time, we had told them about how the legal research market worked. And in essence, there's a company that's called Westlaw, and it's owned by a company called Thomson Reuters. And then there's another group called LexisNexis, but in essence, these groups all work much too close together. And so we had said it's a monopoly that Westlaw is controlling and Thomson Reuters. And this was back in 2015. I say this to PG, and we say this in office hours. And then PG says, and the tweet's out there, he goes, well, I'm going to tweet this. He goes, it's not even, it's a duopoly. They're not even hiding it. So there's a tweet from our office hours of PG saying that. And then fast forward, and we hadn't chatted about it yet, where we ended up being the first, and I mentioned like the first ever generative AI lawsuit. And that's because Thomson Reuters ended up suing Ross for copyright infringement. And it's funny because then we brought an antitrust lawsuit against them, and that's going through the courts. But even back in 15, within, I think office hours with PG was 30 minutes or 45 minutes, he immediately understood, and then felt passionate about it, tweeted it. And take our business out of the equation, just insert any business. That's incredible to be as to have that clarity,
like clarity of thought and
to immediately
decisiveness.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's an incredible gift. So that stands out for sure. And then the other thing that stands out, I think, is just the camaraderie-ship and the friendship and the advice in the group office hours with Gary and Michael and Casser in particular, because they ended up really being more like friends who were hip. You know, you're like, oh, these guys, like, I remember when Gary was talking, he was like, you know, hearing him design the Palantir logo and like learning all that history and how humble they all were. It inspired you to be the best and humble founder you could be, because everyone came, and you go into YC from all parts of the world, and all of you are like, especially in 15, it was like, we were all like, oh, like in our respective startup communities, we were kind of big deals in the essence of like, we got into YC, and then you're sitting with the like people who have done such incredible things, and the humility they have was like so inspiring to then bring that DNA back into our ecosystems and in our lives. So yeah.
I think you mentioned like was this outside of YC that you got an investment from Sam Altman?
So the Apollo Fund, which is the three brothers led by Max at the time and Jack and Sam, led the pre-seed into my current company, Flexpa. Okay. So Flexpa, what we do is, again, I think we're another early to the party, which is we originally set out to build an AI company in the medical vertical. So the idea was in the future, AI agents would be able to have a read of your data before a human doctor, be able to handle things such as the interpretation of certain tests, et cetera, pre-draft the doctor's note so that the MD would then look at it and say yes or no, clarify it, and then those revisions would be fed back in as training data and start that virtuous cycle. But when we started building, and we were naive, which is the best way to start building. We got in there and like the data in health is impossible. It's
too much regulation and stuff.
Well, it's more, they digitized and then they kind of put a screen on top of paper and then that's it. And then there's a lot of walled gardens. So if you go to your family doctor and then you go to a hospital because you broke your arm and then you move to another part of the same city and you go to another doctor and then you go to another hospital, there's no central repository for that data. So it's residing in all these different places. None of it can be exchanged. There's really no APIs in a lot of these situations. And so when we saw that, we were like, that's the bigger issue. And I wouldn't say that I wanted to necessarily, and we wanted to become a data company in the sense of we are movers and we're in data infrastructure, but we realized it was 100% needed.
Like such a huge problem that it was just obvious.
Yeah, and it was like, there will be no unlock in health unless someone built Flexpa. And so we were like, we will be the ones to unlock it for all of the innovation to come. And what we do is there was this piece of legislation that helped us, which said that anyone on a government health insurance plan now had the right to ping an API and get the data that your health insurance company had on you and be able to sync it into any application. And so we started the company in 2021, 6 months before that legislation took effect. And I got lucky because my law background meant that I could make sense of all that stuff. And my co-founder, Tom, who was employee number one at Ross, also was a lawyer, so we got lucky. And then those APIs are OAuth APIs. And third co-founder, Josh, has extensive experience building in the OAuth world. So he was at a company called Universe. They sold to Ticketmaster, which not everyone loves Ticketmaster, but he and his team ended up building a lot of the OAuth rails for a financial bank syncing of bank data into Ticketmaster. So right team, right time. The three of us have known each other for 15 years. We were pals in college, stayed in touch, and it's been like the best time ever building together. And so what Flexpa does, to just tie it all up, is think about instead of connecting your bank data into your Mint or your bank data into buy something, you're connecting your health insurance data. So the same, you take out the card from your wallet. If it's your first time, you type in your info, and then it says, would you like to sync your medications or your doctor visits or whatever with X application? And that application could be a doctor. It could be you switching insurance plans. So you were at one company, now you're moving to another company, and they have Anthem and you're moving to United. You can sync that data and it goes with you so that there's not this discontinuity of your data and your care. Because ultimately by having all those, that disconnect between all your data, it affects your health outcome and it affects how your financial outcomes too and all this, because there's just there's no longitudinal way to look at it. And so we do that, and we're super excited because this is something that has tremendous application right now, and there's a lot of use cases today. And we're also excited about the use cases tomorrow, which is as AI continues to take shape, what does the future look like when an AI agent is able to, you sync your data with them, they give you a read, you take a picture of something, whatnot, and you're already getting that preliminary visit done by way of an AI agent ahead of visiting a...
So it just saves time, money, and makes it like way easier to get the right result or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And think of just rural populations. Specialist care is really difficult to get. And so I think with the right data flows, because of where AI is and where it's going, almost everything is going to become possible. And so the big unlock is that data has to be flowing. And more importantly, and what we're proud of, is it's patient-directed access with Flexpa. So the patient themselves is now the one saying, yes, I'd like to share X, Y, and Z bits of my data into Y app. And the way that it's done today is by fax, by CD-ROM still, which doesn't make any sense, or by hard copy printing. So
it almost sounds like the banking system running on Cobalt.
Yeah. Actually, in some ways, that might be better. It might be those Cobalt systems, because at least there's a digital aspect. Like, imagine literally you have to go to a doctor's office, get them to hand you physical documents, and then you have to go to like a UPS store, ask them to digitize it, and then it's just images. So you can't really like OCR that data yourself. So it's just a mess. So we believe in a future where everyone will come to treat their health data the way that you see people treating their financial data right now. You will use it, sync it, and get what you want out of certain interactions in a way you've never been able to before.
Yeah, and I think you guys use the like role model of Plaid for the financial system. Yeah. How do you think? So you've had co-founders for both of these companies, for Ross and for Flexpa. How do you think about having co-founders, and then what makes a great co-founder? What makes a bad co-founder?
I think co-founders are like a marriage. It's a professional marriage. It's a business marriage. And so what you want is to find someone that you like and that you can spend a lot of time with. But the most important thing, I think, is someone with a complementary skill set, ideally where you're weakest. And why that's helpful is when you approach a problem, you will naturally, in almost like a fight or flight type situation, you'll naturally go to where your strengths are. And there's a lot of those moments in startups where you're just constantly going, you're up against it. And so having someone be able to have their immediate response be a skill set that is complementary is super helpful. And the only way to know that is by knowing that co-founder for a long time, ideally before. And so Tom and Josh are my current co-founders. We knew each other for 15 years. So that's kind of the most extreme example. And we would, it sounds funny, but we would do like friend reunions every year, ideally, because we all met in college. And then we all were doing different things. And then we would like rent an Airbnb with other friends as well, who are amazing. And we would then hang out. And at one of the last ones, I was talking to Josh, and Tom and I had been kind of thinking through some stuff. And I was like, what do you think about this and that? And he got excited about it that way. So like we knew it was just like this beautiful like thing where I know him, he knows me, I know Tom, he knows me. We all know each other. And then with Ross, it was actually, we had known each other. It wasn't like, that was another one where we had known each other, not 15 years because we were all young. Jimo was 21, I was 24. So if we had known each other for 15 years, could have been cool, but we just didn't have the opportunity to meet each other younger. But we had already known each other, and we also had really strong friendships with mutual people who could almost vouch / you knew that if you were friends with so-and-so, that you were probably a high quality person / you got their vibe. So that really helped. And and Parglaz was my other co-founder at Ross, who's just an incredible human being and a good human being and a person who doesn't shy away from like always doing the hard work. And we are at Ross, one of our sayings was grab a shovel as like a value, just like get this done. We got to get this done. And then at Flexpa, one of our key values is always put away the shopping cart. And so when I think of those founders, I think of those values. And so Ross, Jimo, and Parglaz, like we always were down to grab a shovel and do the hard work. Because when you're pioneering and building at the edge of what's possible and building a startup, it's like doing things on extreme hard mode. And then with this, put away the shopping cart is really about like making sure you do the hard thing that might be a little bit more mundane in air quotes. And it's just been really great. And your co-founders are essential. And lastly, I would say you have to make sure your co-founders are people who would never give up. But I feel like that's so built in and like an obvious thing, but I will say it. because startups, 99% of startups fail, but that's because of that 99%, so many of those people who are building are not building because they truly want to. They might have found their way in because like business school, that's like a stream that's popular, or they might find their way in because they think it, like they watch a YouTube video, or because it's become very fashionable.
Or they watch the Social Network.
Yeah. Silicon Valley, the TV show. I see a lot of founders, which is cool. A lot of good founders though.
I watched that like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah. I love it too. Although for me, watching Silicon Valley, the TV show, reminds me of, so I love watching Spinal Tap, which is a mockumentary. And apparently there was this rocker, and I think it was David Lee Roth, I believe, who it was on TV, and this might be an apocryphal story, but sometimes you don't want, never get in the way of a bad story. Mm-hmm. So he's watching, and it was on TV, and he saw Spinal Tap, and he was looking and watching the mockumentary, but he didn't know it was a mockumentary, and apparently asked someone, hey, did we ever play with these guys? Like, who are these guys again? And I feel that way sometimes when I'm watching Silicon Valley, the TV show, because we got sued by a big company that, you know, like, and like, we obviously, like, I feel very good because like, but like, it's just too real, that show.
It's too real.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I love this quote by Elon Musk. He says, building a startup is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. I've heard you say that. What have been the moments in like your startup journey, other than, we'll get to the suing part, but like other than that, what have been other moments where you felt like you were chewing glass and staring into the abyss?
You know, I think I would add if I could add to that, I totally agree with it. Startups are like chewing glass and staring into the abyss, and being a founder is being a person who likes it. And so like, I like that. Like, and I think he does too. I think everyone does. Like Reid Hoffman says, and I love that quote, you probably know too, like jumping off and assembling the plane before you hit the ground. And being a founder is someone who likes doing that. And so it's hard for me to pick out the moment, but like, you're always on that roller coaster of it's the best, it's the worst. And I think now I've been building startups for 10 years now. And I am now at a point where, and it's not perfect, it's going to be a lifelong journey, but like evening out that feeling has been something I've been very proud of. But yeah, when our moments, we got that lawsuit, that obviously that was tough, but it's tons of things like, you know, and I can't remember all of them, but for example, like, you know, selling a big enterprise deal that really will help you make your numbers for the next quarter or for whatever, and it's all going great, and then someone at that enterprise leaves. And then I remember once someone left, and the person who ended up taking their position was a person who I think was invested / mentoring / I think on the cap table of a competitor. And so like, obviously they didn't finish that deal. Yeah. But that's like all the time, is like things like that, where you're going to hire someone that you've been really trying to find, doesn't work out for some reason, or you do end up hiring someone that you've been trying to find and worked really hard to get, and then it just doesn't work out. They're not the person you think they are. So like, most of startup is that, but I couldn't live my life in any other way. Like, playing a lot of football, you know, you always see like those documentaries of like, and it's very sad. And they always say athletes die 2 deaths, one when you can't play your sport, and then your real death. But when someone says like, I don't know what else to do, I just play football, or I just box, or I just blah, blah. I feel like that about startups. Like, I don't know what else to do. I just do this.
It's
like, this is what I do. Yeah. This is like what I do.
Yeah. Do you have any interesting, like, previously unknown stories from like growing and scaling? Because like Ross, you know, you started in like 2014, 2015, and up till I believe like 2020, it's growing very well. And then you get hit with the lawsuit and things kind of fall apart. But do you have any interesting stories from that growth period?
Yeah. So we started growing like 15, 20% month over month. And our NPS score was like almost consumer tech level. Like, people actually started really loving it. And what was cool about that is like the idea of lawyers who, if you've ever tried to sell technology to a lawyer, it's a journey. But that they fell so deeply in love with it and were so passionate about it. Like, things I remember hearing, they were like, this feels like going this must have been what it feels like going from a Model T to a Tesla, one of our users said, and tweeted it. And like there was like a bunch of things that happened organically. And I think the happiest things about the whole process was when I would go to an event and I'd be asked to talk about AI or law or innovation or whatever. And then I would talk about Ross, and then a hand would go up and someone would say, I'm a Ross user. And I remember at first, like, that's a nervous moment because they stood up, and then they would say, and I just want to say, it's helped me improve this, it helped me win this case, or people started sharing these stories of the impact that the product was having in their practice. And what's cool and why I love being I was in law, and now I'm in health, and my next area that I'm really excited about is education, but it's the one-to-many of the individuals you're working with, because that one lawyer using that tool is now helping the lives of hundreds, thousands, and then, depending on their family and friends, how far you want this to go. But it's real to think about it that way. Everyone's life is affected. And if your friend is going through a lawsuit, or if you're a parent and then their friends and their coworkers, et cetera. So to hear that change and to hear the happiness of using enterprise software was something I definitely recall fondly. And I really haven't really spoken about as much just because it's not something you talk about a lot with people. But yeah, getting those stories. And then with Flexpa, I think the big thing that's made me so happy is we're already starting to get some of those stories of people like, hey, I used Flexpa, synced my data, and then one of the use cases for us is reviewing your billing to make sure that you weren't overbilled. And someone immediately found thousands of dollars that they were overbilled, and then they got it back. And most Americans, as we all know, are living in many ways check to check, and a few $1,000s is huge. And so starting to hear those stories, starting to hear people say, hey, I was able to make the right decision. Hey, I was able to qualify for a clinical trial. Hey, this was so incredible. That is the best feeling. And so that's what keeps you going, for sure. And that's why building technology and that one-to-many is what got me into it in many ways. Like, I saw from a very young age that it changed my life. And I was able to tap into this whole world and this whole online community. And I just want to keep giving back to it.
Yeah. How do you think about, like, I think that most of the products where people genuinely love the experience of using them are designed that way in some meaningful aspect. I think it's very hard for people to just, or, for a founder to just fall into creating a product that consumers or whoever their customer is loves. So how do you think about designing something that people will love?
Yeah, it's an obsession, for sure. And I feel like the quality of your product and designing it is the respect you have for your users. So like, do you respect your users? Because if you respect your users, you're going to want to provide them with a very high quality designed product. And users feel that when they interact with your tool. So that's one. The other thing early, because that's a high watermark, especially early. And so the thing that I learned, which I think was a big unlock, is showing your users you care through iterating and showing them that you are upgrading your software as it goes. Because Ross, like all products at the beginning, it's not so great at a lot of different aspects. But then if someone was to complain and say, it does this, I don't like this, or hey, and then you start to say, hey, you know what? We just, thank you so much. 2 weeks from now or a week from now, there it is. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there it is. And in law in particular, there wasn't really a product that had done that before. And it's crazy to think about, but because most of the software that the lawyers were using, they used it and it had already been like fully baked, and it never iterated and never changed. And so that was both a really good thing and a bad thing, because at first, some of the more closed-minded folks, they tried it and they were like, this is the software. This is what it is.
So it must suck.
Yeah, and exactly. Whereas the ones who got it, and many did, were like, oh yeah, this is great. I can see where it's going. Can you do this? And so the way you think of design is your goal is to create the best design product for your users, but don't let that smother you and stop you from getting your product out. Really, your users, if you're solving a real problem, if you're iterating and showing them that you're integrating real changes, not things that you want because it's beautiful. There's also a difference between beauty for beauty's sake and a beautifully designed product. Beauty for beauty's sake, I love roses, and it's spring, so I was walking around and you see a beautiful rose, I'll stop and look, I'll take a picture. I'm like that cheesy with beauty. But I don't think a user cares about maybe some of the more beautiful things you can put in. And I see so many early stage startups thinking through and having these grand arguments over how beautiful the design is in the app. And they're doing it without talking to users and getting those opinions. And it's like, hey, first it has to really work and function and solve the problem. Then let's beautify it and make it really great. And the story I always think of, and I don't know the type of phone it was, but I heard that there was a product that came out, and basically 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 of them did not function well. It was basically a problem. But how users responded to it was they would just buy more of them, because they were like, there's going to be a problem with 1 in X, who cares, we'll just buy more. And that's what you want. There's going to be problems, but and yeah, it comes down to the respect for users. You got to deeply respect your users. They are, if you're doing something and you're solving a big enough problem, you're telling the world that you believe you can solve the problem better, your team can solve the problem better than anyone else and the status quo. Yeah. And these people, these users are saying, yeah, I'm going to give you the time of day to test this out and to try this. Respect them. You respect them, design something beautiful for them, sure, but beautiful is functional and functional is beautiful.
Yeah. Do you have any role models for other products, let's say other founders who have designed things that you really appreciate and have learned from?
Yeah. I think, oddly enough, it starts really small in the sense of the Loom, just the creation of the Loom, and then the steam engine. And most of these elements, and what I've come to think about a lot, is that inventions are the combinations of other inventions that were transformational before, and then by combining 3 or 4 or 5 transformational inventions into one, you then create the next transformational invention. And so to land this plane, I think a really great example is Tony Fadell with the iPod, and then obviously Nest. But the iPod, and respect to Tony, is if you think of the dial of the iPod, it's the Nest, right? But he got it done. And I think it's smart. But really the innovation of that and thinking through that design, but the combination of what he did by bringing advances that were already occurring across multiple areas, such as being able to package that level of compute into a small space, battery life, the ability to download music, to have digital music. All of these were transformational innovations that then were packaged into a beautiful product. And so that's what I think about a lot, is how can we be the transformational piece of technology today, but then how do we play a role in being part of the next one? And a good example of that is NVIDIA. So NVIDIA, GPUs, video games, huge, PC gaming. And then now that same piece of technology being used for AI. And oftentimes I think the transformationalness of a tech, and then with the iPod and then Nest, it has multiple acts. And I'm really excited about Flexpa in particular, because I see it having so many acts to come. It's going to play a role in so many transformational episodes in and over the next 50, 100, 200 years.
Is that so? How are you thinking about designing something for that long of a time scale? Very few founders are talking about their company, 25, even like 10 years in the future, maybe 10 years, but definitely not 25 or 50. So how do you think about like long-term thinking?
So we're lucky in the sense that we are creating the rails for this data to be able to spread. So then you just work from first principles from a Flexpa perspective. In the future, will health data be much more accessible and digital? Has to be yes. What in the future will individuals need to have access to their digital health data in order to get higher quality healthcare? Yes. What will that healthcare look like? I don't know. That's going to be tough. I have a lot of guesses and ideas. But because Flexpa is going to be the fundamental element that unlocks all of that innovation, it then therefore can become much more timeless. Because we're going to be there for all of the waves of what's to come, because what's essential for all of the innovation to come will be the data to unlock the hardware, the software, the wearables, the implantables to come. And so I see it. And we actually at Flexpa, when we hire, we talk, and in the interview process, we tell people we're here for the rest of our lives, ideally. Like, do you want to work at a company that transforms an industry over the next 25, 50 years? And how long can we get to spend together doing this together and working on this?
What are the other traits that you look for when you're thinking about hiring someone?
Yeah. Do you want to be here? Do you really want to be here? Everything that's ever been transformed in human history has occurred because it was built by individuals who wanted to be doing the thing they're doing. And so we talk about that. Like, I'd rather have a small team of people who give a shit and want to be doing what they're doing than a bunch of people who might have talent, but who might be kind of looking around for, oh, that's cool. Oh, this is neat. It's like, no, do you want to be building Flexpa? And do you believe that the future will have that Flexpa will be the rails of the healthcare system of the future? And so the question then becomes, how do you discern that? It's actually easier than you think, because you ask questions as to what kind of activities and things have they built in the past. So a lot of the people at Flexpa have been building in health or building in data infrastructure, or really excited about the future in terms of startups, et cetera. Like, these are individuals who this is what they have been wanting to do, and they have now found a place for them to do it.
Yeah.
So I remember I ended up going in San Francisco. There's a Fairmont, one of those nice hotels. And I was there because during Christmas, they put up a beautiful tree and they have hot chocolate. And I have two boys, and I wanted to take a nice picture with my wife. And we were there. And I ended up seeing an older gentleman who was the concierge. And his name slips me. I do know it. I got his contact info too. And I looked at him, and I don't know what hit me, but I was like, I'm going to ask this guy a question. So I asked him, hey, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, what do you look for when you're hiring for your team? And he looked at me and he said, it's quite easy. You try to find the people who are already doing the thing you want to do, but are doing it in other places and don't have a place to do it together with a group of other people. And then it's kind of almost like a fun, he goes, oh, so like, why'd you ask me the question? And I was like, I don't know. I feel like you would know the answer to it. And then he's like, points to a plaque behind him. It's insane. And it turns out that he was the first ever concierge in the United States and had created, at fancy hotels, they wear these keys.
Yeah.
And he was the first key person and brought that system to the United States. And I don't know why I felt the urge to ask him that question, but it also made me feel really happy when I ended up finding out that like Steve Jobs had asked him a bunch of questions and I didn't know. This is like
the same person?
The same guy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there was like an ad for Apple that this guy was in the background /in, and I didn't know any of this. And so why I bring this all up is one, why I brought that story up is I do believe there's like some sort of form of destiny and God has a plan for us all. And that's like something I'm big on. And second, I do believe what you need to do and what we're doing at Flexpa and any high quality team is find the people who are already doing the thing, but don't have a place to do it. And then think of every major huge breakthrough. Like let's look at Apple and the original Mac. Like you got Woz just hacking in a garage. Okay. Then where's he hanging out? The homebrew computer club. Who's there? People who have jobs, some in technology and technology adjacent, but they're just building PCs. Why? Because they just want to build like these computers because they're fun. And then you tell them, hey, there's a company where you get paid to do the thing you want to do. And most people, and this is what happens at Flexpa all the time, and I'm one of those people, I'm like, this is amazing. Like I have a job doing the thing I want to do. That's how you build great things. That's how you find and those are the people you have to find. And that's how you then build transformational technology, because it's not even work. It's what you're going to do anyway.
Are you kind of thinking about it a little bit like, I like the Jeff Bezos thing where there's like mercenaries and missionaries, and he's typically talking about like founders, but it almost sounds like you're looking to find the missionaries who don't even realize that like, maybe they're just hacking on a computer or something. And they don't even realize that they could go join another group, and then you just find that person and bring them.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, I actually think another thing that will come to change in startup world, we've done so much adoration of the founder, but we haven't done enough of the founding team. And I think that's just because the maturity of a field, like at first, also everyone likes a founder story. It feels good and it's exciting. But if you really think even about, let's go back, because I'm a big geek for like the history of technology, and you look at PCs, you look at like Xerox PARC. Xerox PARC is full of like the coolest people, and they were in some ways like the founding team of the internet and computers. And yeah, so like Doug Engelbart makes the mouse, but in that same, he also does like hyperlinking, shared documents, working remote, and a whole
Wasn't
bunch of
the
things.
graphical user interface also created a Xerox PARC?
Yes, okay, absolutely. Yeah. And then, so Ted Nelson, who wrote Computer Lib, it's like behind me, and signed by him, he's now become a pal, which is like the coolest thing ever. Like, so at the top of Computer Lib, it says, you can and must understand computers now. And then he wrote, and you do. So that's kind of like, that's like my Oscar. Like that's one of my favorite, like that's like one of my most prized possessions. But let me land this plane with all that. Like that group of people makes that founding team. So they become almost like the founding team of everything we do. And I think we need to do more around sharing the stories of the founding team, and the qualities you need to look for in a founding team might not be exactly as what you want in a founder. Because I think a founding team full of founders, because originally with Flexpa, we also had this idea of only hiring founders or ex-founders as the founding team. But we've since pivoted from that idea to finding the people who, like I've said, are going to do the thing, but also who like might not want to found a company, but want to be there basically as early as possible. Yeah. So that a lot of some of the stuff has been figured out. Like they don't want to have to figure out like, how are we going to raise the money? How are we going to figure out payroll? How are we going to, all that.
The company setting up and everything like that.
Yeah, it's like, that's not for everyone. And I get that, but they're like, hey, that's already been done. I'm there. And they're there right away. And those are the most incredible people. Like I am lucky every day that I get to work with the founding team at Flexpa, because these are individuals that I admire, I look up to, I learn from, and I have a lot of fun with. And I think the world needs to do more recognition of founding teams rather than just the founder.
Yeah. So I know that with Ross, I think you got to like 30 employees. Was that right?
Yeah, 30 or 40, and yeah, something like that.
How did it feel when you're grinding away, and even I guess as early as 2015 when you're talking to Paul Graham, that Thomson Reuters has this kind of like monopoly, right? And how did you feel when in 2020 or something you get slapped with this lawsuit that basically forces you to stop?
Yeah.
That's right. What was that like?
Yeah. So like, I will say this, like at the beginning, there's something, but I wouldn't say I really realized how bad the monopoly was until like later, because I think there's like a naivete / like a force field. So I really only started really, and that's why I'm saying Paul might have been way ahead of the curve, because the fact that he said that the way he did it wasn't the way that I was describing it. I was describing something and then he said, oh, it's because of this. And, but I think we end up really realizing maybe like 18, 19, whatever, but how it felt was really tough. I mean, like I think part of my American dream and why I'm here and why I'm so proud to be, have American children and be building in America and having my family in America is because of open markets and a capitalist system. And so to then be sued, preventing us from continuing to innovate and do something that ultimately was about democratizing access to legal services was really tough. However, the silver lining has been it's restored a lot of my belief in America because the justice system's been so great. So we have some really great stuff happening with our lawsuits, and I am invigorated to know that in over a long enough timeline, I think that's going to play out well. But I do think of that team every day, and I think of, and it hurts. Like it's like I like losing a child in a way, because I think of the faces, the people, the drive, the office, the camaraderie ship, the dreams, all the time.
Yeah. How did your investors, your employees, and actually, your customers react to, you making that decision?
Oh, they were incredible. It was like talk about like, again, like the beauty and the silver lining and things. So we ended up transitioning all of our customers to different competitors that were competitors of ours, but we ended up talking to them and they supported us. And then we, the investors, we were like, hey, we're now going to have to fight this out in the justice system. And they were fully behind us and we're like, hell yeah, like go after it and we have your back. Family and friends were pretty amazing. But I think why it also occurred that way is anyone who knew anything about that industry, when it all happened, they were like, oh, so I guess what everyone said in quiet is true, that they will just sue all their competitors and that they will do this. So it wasn't like a big surprise when it happened. Although as a founder, it's like I said, you have that force field, where you're like just building. And so I think that really helped. And now one thing that has been really incredible has been all of the founders, and I've backed some of them, who come to me and they were like, you spoke at my school and I was in first year of comp sci and now I have this legal tech startup and you helped inspire this and you did that. And so like, I've been lucky to invest in some amazing early legal tech startups and mentor a lot of founders. And so sometimes like it's in the hardest parts of your life oftentimes lead to the most beautiful things too. And there's been a lot of that. And I guess the last thing will be getting justice. And I'm really excited about that. We have a trial coming up in August. And then we're waiting to hear back on the antitrust stuff. But that's, especially as someone who just loves contact and loves physical sports, this to me is like...
it almost feels like Travis Kalanick, where he's like, all right, let's compete.
Yeah,
bring it on.
I love it. I love it. And I believe in the justice system of the United States of America. I believe in democracy and I believe in free markets. And so with that, you can't lose.
Yeah. What does a successful outcome look like for this antitrust lawsuit? Well,
one of the 1,000 lawyers on this file will probably freak out if I talk too much. You know what I mean? They'll call me and be like, Andrew. But I think for me is like, I think what success looks like is the law is open. So there's paywalls around the law. And right now in America, for you to access the law as an individual, you have to pay. If you want to have access to the most up-to-date law, citable law, there are sources of law that you can get to, but you can't cite to them and they're not as fresh and they don't have all of the data you need. So I think fundamental to democracy is the ability to have access to the law. And that means you as an individual. It also means you as a builder. So I believe in the future, law will be like, you should be able to fork the law, right? That's like, you should be able to build with the law. And think about the incredible progress that will be made, because it's going to happen. That's what success looks like for me. When laws open, when you can build with the law, what that means for everyone in the United States of America. How incredible is that reality? Don't you want to live in that future where you could do data analysis on things, where you can find the right passages, where you could even, the system could modernize itself, like, and update the laws and find things. Maybe we could do automatic updates, getting rid of old laws that are not really helpful.
Like that are kind of stale.
Absolutely. Because all we've done is just add more and more and more and more. And we need to make sure that the law is for the people, by the people. And I would add, like, to be able to be built with, by the people. And this is all normal, though. If you think about how this all works, it always takes time for the legal system to then catch up to what's happening in reality, because the original drafters of a bunch of things, it would be impossible for them to have thought of a concept of like forking the law.
Yeah.
But we'll get there, and like we always do. And I believe I'm really motivated and happy for that. And so that's what success looks like. And then after that, what we could do and get maybe the band back together and do and continue to build would be really exciting.
Okay. What over the next, like, let's say 15 years most excites you?
What most excites me over the next 15 years is watching my sons grow up and spending time with my wife. I think family to me is like the most important thing ever. So I think like that's the first thing that comes to mind, although maybe it's like more like technology based, but that to me, I have 2 sons right now, and there's nothing better. My wife, marrying her has added decades to my life, and she's just incredible. So like, when you say, what do you look forward to 15 years from now, is being with them. From a technology lens, and obviously we're talking about that.
It's actually both. I think it's really important to have kids. So
yeah, that's something I don't shut up about. I think we need to all have more kids, and we're facing a future that is pretty stark in terms of depopulation. So I think we need more kids. And humans are awesome, and humans solve problems. And so a great way to solve problems in the future is having more humans trying to solve those problems and working with machines as machines become more capable. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And I also believe that's going to happen. It's an inevitability. And I think we already won, but we have to keep fighting to make sure that happens. But other things that I'm really excited about. So I'll start with watching the healthcare system continue to come and modernize into a truly digital way, rather than just taking analog and putting a screen on it, because that's what's happened to date. And that's natural. That's what happens in every industry. And I think it's I read a lot of history, and I think it keeps me very grounded, and realizing that everything happens in cyclical ways, and it keeps me very calm. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also excited to see where AI continues to take us, watching that democratize access to really key services. I'm excited in law to watch that happen, and hopefully to watch that open law take shape. And then 15 years, every day is such a gift. Like the prospect of being able to see where things go in 15 years is just super exciting to me. And I feel like I probably came online 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And so it's been so amazing to watch what's already happened. And so I feel like I'm like participating and watching the greatest show of all time, which is like humanity.
I totally agree. Final question. What's the hardest thing you've overcome?
I want to be thoughtful. I think school was a big challenge for me. Like, I was such a self-taught person who wanted to just get a book on a topic and learn that way. And I found that the pace of school wasn't something I liked, nor the style of it was something I really enjoyed. So the idea that I had to be grouped up with other individuals, and then a bell went and I had to move to a different group, And that sometimes, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I had some really incredible teachers who inspired me, but sometimes if a teacher was dialing it in and they didn't want to be there, which upsets me. I hate being with other people who don't want to be doing the thing they're doing. Yep. And I saw that occurring, and I had to be around them and then graded by them and then participate in that. And it was extremely difficult for me, not the schooling part, but it did end up manifesting itself in the schooling part because I was so upset with how it was structured and the people that I had to interact with that it was a big challenge. And it was one of the biggest challenges I overcame because I then ended up going to law school. And law school was actually my undergrad as well as law school were the best times of school because it was more self-directed. I get to choose the courses and I was engaging with. By the time I hit law school, I had professors who really wanted to be there. And I love that. I went to the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, and I shout them out every time I can just because they really care and they really wanted to be there. And then aspects in my undergrad. And so like one of the things that stood out in my undergrad, took a course on Dostoevsky. Professor walks in. They're now the president of the North American Dostoevsky Society. And they were like, I assume you've read all of Dostoevsky's works. I also assume you've probably read them in the original Russian. So this course will be more of an in-depth dive. And I had read Dostoevsky, but not in the original Russian. And so like, I love that. So then that professor ended up being one of my references for law school. So like, I like that. But school itself was just a slog. And it was necessary because if I had dropped out of school in high school or something, everyone loves the story of the dropout of like college or whatnot. I don't think I would have had the credibility that I now have, especially with my law degree and all this. So I'm glad that I went through it, but it was a challenge every day. Like I really didn't want to do it. And a lot of it felt so performative. That's what upset me about it. Like you're testing me on something that you don't care about. It's not really tied to reality. And so that was my
if you actually ask like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Maybe there's not a good answer.
Absolutely. And if you ask those teachers why they were teaching that course, maybe they would say, I drew the short straw and they needed someone to teach 10th grade, whatever. And I don't like being around people who are going through the motions. I want to be with people who are there because they want to be there and are doing the things that they want to do. And I will say this, that is an incredible promise of AI. We are getting closer every day to a reality where you will be able to choose as a human being to engage in the activities, the jobs, the way to spend your time in exactly what you want to do. And that to me sounds like a true like renaissance for humanity where we all get to do the things that we want to do.
Yep. Andrew, that's an awesome place to end it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.